Imagine India right at the dawn of the 20th century. It was a landscape of immense transition, a time when ancient spiritual traditions were suddenly meeting these very modern, structured educational frameworks. Let's dive right into this explainer, because today we're exploring a truly remarkable historical artifact. We're looking at a 1916 textbook that was specifically designed to unify Hindu belief. Our journey here is going to take us deep into a manual that was crafted to teach religion and ethics, giving us a pretty incredible window into exactly how an entire generation of students was taught to understand their faith, their cosmos, and their duty to society.
To map out this historical and philosophical landscape, we'll be moving through 5 core areas. First, a unified Hindu foundation. Second, the hierarchy of sacred texts. Third, spirit, matter, and cosmos. Fourth, ethics, action, and liberation. And fifth, a legacy of tolerance. Starting right off with Section 1, a unified Hindu foundation. So, published by the Board of Trustees of the Central Hindu College in Benares, this text had a highly specific, actually quite revolutionary objective. Looking at the foreword here, the compilers were seeking to marry Western educational methods with a wide, liberal, and distinctively Hindu framework. They essentially realized that to build a strong future, they needed an educational foundation that was deeply rooted in tradition, but expansive enough to actually unite an incredibly diverse population.
The Board of Trustees intentionally bypassed all the orthodox controversies to lay down a solid, unifying foundation for these young students. Acknowledging just how many divergent forms of thought exist within Hinduism, they established this absolutely brilliant pedagogical rule: teach only the fundamental principles accepted by all, and literally just leave out the distinctive, divisive views of any single sect. Basically, if it divides us, ignore it. If it unites us, teach it clearly and simply.
And this philosophy completely dictated their choice of the title, Sanatana Dharma. The compilers were very explicit about this. They noted that while the term had, in some parts of India, taken on sectarian overtones, they were adopting it in its purest, most original sense, the eternal religion. It was a highly deliberate choice. They wanted to emphasize these unshakable truths that no sect could possibly repudiate. They weren't trying to reform the religion, actually. They were distilling it down to its very essence.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, Hierarchy of Sacred Texts.
The textbook structures religious knowledge beautifully. Honestly, it's almost like a grand ancient temple. It descends from the supreme, final authority of the Shruti at the very top, down to the Smriti, which governs laws and society, and finally down to the historical and allegorical supports, which are the Puranas and the Itihasa. By defining it in this really clear, stepped way, young students could immediately grasp where different teachings came from and exactly how they related to one another.
Right at that very peak is the Shruti, which means knowledge, or that which is heard. The textbook teaches that this is made up of the 4 Vedas, the Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharva Veda. This is the bedrock, the core foundation, chanted by young boys in 1916 exactly as it was by their forefathers thousands of years prior. The text firmly establishes that all philosophical systems and all sects must appeal to the Shruti as the final absolute authority in any dispute. It is the unchanging anchor of the entire faith.
So, if the Shruti and Smriti form the foundation and the walls of this great edifice, the Puranas and Itihasa act as the vital structural buttresses. The textbook explains that the great epics, like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, were composed to make highly complex theology accessible to the everyday masses. They did this through deeply beautiful stories and moral allegories. They're essentially the practical, relatable, human applications of those high Vedic truths.
Let's delve into Section 3, Spirit, Matter, and Cosmos.
This is where the metaphysics of the textbook gets really fascinating. The text insists, quite strictly, that we must never confuse spirit and matter. They are the primary pair of opposites out of which the entire universe is built. On one side, you have spirit, or Ishvara, which is characterized by Sat, Chit, and Anandam. That's being, thought, power, and bliss. And opposing it is matter, or Prakriti, characterized by Tama, Raja, and Sattvam, inertia, mobility, and rhythm. Spirit provides the thought and the life, while matter provides the resistance, the movement, and the form. It's described as this ultimate, beautiful cosmic dance.
The curriculum then deepens this concept, bringing it down to the individual level. It explains that the invisible, immortal spirit, the Atma, is the inner ruler dwelling within all objects. But when a portion of the spirit clothes itself in thick, heavy matter, it creates the separated self, known as the Jivatma.
It's a wonderful alignment of ancient philosophy with more scientific thought, noting that while we absolutely cannot perceive the spirit with our physical senses, it is the vital I inside each of us, simply trapped within a heavy coat of physical matter.
Which brings us to Section 4, Ethics, Action, and Liberation.
How exactly do these grand cosmic principles govern our everyday human behavior? Well, students were taught a rather profound lesson regarding the origin of their own emotions. The text explains that our desires are simply the spirit's innate quality of bliss searching for satisfaction in the outer world. When we unite with an object that brings pleasure, it creates attraction, or love. When we unite with an object bringing pain, it creates repulsion, or hate. It's beautifully pragmatic. The textbook advises that these raw emotions shouldn't just be suppressed, but intelligently guided by reason into actual virtues.
And here is where the philosophy truly hits the pavement. Drawing directly from the Bhagavad Gita, the textbook establishes this as the supreme rule of conduct, teaching students the immense value of balanced, unselfish duty. Students were taught that a well-balanced character acts dutifully in the world, not out of some greedy desire for a reward, but simply because the action itself is inherently right. It's a remarkably powerful lesson in cultivating a dignified, self-reliant mindset.
Ultimately, the text argues that gratifying worldly desire yields only a tiny fraction of the happiness that comes from the disappearance of desire altogether. Through the ancient story of sage Yajnavalkya and King Janaka, students learned that true liberation, or moksha, comes when one stops craving possessions entirely. As the textbook wisely puts it, as the horns of a cow grow with the cow, so does the desire for wealth grow with its possession. True freedom from anxiety is achieved only when a wise person can look upon all living creatures as themselves.
And finally, Section 5, A Legacy of Tolerance. In this final section, we uncover the ultimate civic and moral ambition of this 1916 curriculum. The compilers were very explicit. They didn't just want to create theological scholars who could memorize texts. They intended to build character. This entire foundation of right thinking was designed to shape youths into pious, upright, self-reliant, and loyal citizens. The fundamental principles of the religion were utilized as the very tools needed to forge a genuinely good human being. And this, for me, is perhaps the most beautiful and culturally significant takeaway from the entire book. While it is a distinctively Hindu text, it insists the students must cultivate absolute reverence for all faiths. It explicitly commands the youth to respect the differences of religion among non-Hindus, viewing every single faith as merely a different road to the exact same supreme reality. It is a profound, striking statement of universal brotherhood embedded right at the heart of a century-old educational textbook. This brilliantly illustrates the enduring power of the Sanatana Dharma textbook. It wasn't just teaching theology, it was architecting a society based on balance, duty, and deep mutual respect. So I'll leave you with this thought to ponder long after this explainer ends. If a manual from over a century ago could so seamlessly blend ancient spiritual ethics with the civic duty of universal tolerance, how might we apply these exact principles to heal the divides in our modern world?